Yes. Well, I'd like to. I mean, I want to congratulate all three of you and express my agreement with what I take to be the general approach, which is to emphasize similarities in many ways across any number of different groups in societies, and that there are many different forms of terrorism. There are many different explanations for terrorism. There are many different religious motives or non-religious motives for terrorism, and at the same time that all world religions have histories of committing violence against one another and other faiths as well, and that those similarities are important for us to all keep in mind. But I'm also struck that beyond that broader stroke discussion, if we look at the specific situation of Muslims in the United States, one thing strikes me that's important to address, and it's not easy to address, and as soon as I say this, I fear I'm going to be misunderstood. But that Muslims in the United States are overwhelmingly, even this is not exclusively true, but they are overwhelmingly immigrants or recently arrived immigrants.
Two-thirds.
Two-thirds.
Yes. And that makes a difference in terms of how Americans perceive not just Muslims, but perceive terrorism committed by Muslims. And that's very hard to get around. That's another burden, I think, that, of the sort that this gentleman was suggesting. I understand that Muslims are also citizens, and that's important too, but they do come from recently arrived immigration streams, and immigrants have their own challenges and pose specific kinds of challenges, whether they're Muslims or not. There's often, as you've suggested and what you've pointed to, several of you tonight, there are problems in the second and third generation of adjustment, of having immigrant parents who don't understand how America works, don't always speak the language well. The second and third generation understand lots of things that their parents don't, and that upsets all sorts of normal authority relations in families. And that's a factor that, and that has to do with, again, Muslims being immigrants. And then the final point I'll make about that is, of course, that non-immigrant Americans, when they have a sense of that about Muslims, that these guys are newcomers and look what some of them have done, committed terrorist acts, there's a sense of betrayal, that these guys are here and they don't appreciate the fact that they are immigrants. And that can go in all sorts of very unpleasant and unreasonable and Fox-like news directions. That's not where I'm going with this. I'm simply suggesting that that's a factor in this discussion of terrorism pertaining to Muslims that is somewhat unique. Timothy McVeigh was not an immigrant. And I just wanted to put that out there for your consideration.
I don't know how to respond, but I agree with you that there is a challenge here, because let me complicate this even further. That the impact of this relationship is negatively affecting the other immigrant communities. Look at many of the Asian American communities who are not Muslims, and the Hispanic community, some of them who are recent arrivals in the country, they are being looked at differently, and they are suffering from this complicated, convoluted relationship. And I think that the way to deal with it is to have what we are having right now. Have an open conversation to recognize that we are in this together, and we will not be able to. And this is actually my conversation with the National Counterterrorism Center, with the Department of Homeland Security, with various people, and they say, the United States is not going to be able to bomb our way out of this solution. We are not going to be able to police the entire country out of these challenges that we are living in, and it would require a partnership. So I remember I said it takes a network to break a network. That's what we will have to create as a community, to have networks and recognize we are not the other. We are all in it together. Actually, we are in it so much more together because I love my children more than anything else in the world. And they say, and one day my son said, you know what, don't worry about making the world better for me, I want you to be with me. And I said, you are my inspiration to make this world better. And he said, don't make the world better because I don't see you. And there's truth to it, and I felt like crying. But the reality is that they are our inspiration to make this world better for them. And we are in this together because going forward, we cannot have a world where people hate each other for one reason or the other, or are mistrusting towards each other, and resulting in a relationship. I say this so many times, but I'm going to say it again. We in the United States live in a society that is the most pluralistic society in the history of the world. Not right now, at this time, but the history of the world. And that comes with a responsibility. That comes with a responsibility for everyone, including the Muslims, non-Muslims, immigrants, non-immigrants, because we have what nobody else has ever been able to achieve. And that's a source of pride, but also responsibility. And there are forces that want to change them for one reason or the other. Some are doing this for political reasons, some are feeling insecure. Look, there are less whites and more non-whites and so on. There are all sorts of forces in the picture. But end of the day, we are also living through unprecedented financial, political challenges in the world, economic challenges. And it would require us to have open conversations and putting our heads together, because my children will go to school, my children will go with your children to the school. They will be working together to make this community, this country, and this world a better place. And we cannot do that without having these frank conversations. I don't know if I answered your question, but it's a difficult question to answer, but this was my poor attempt.
You're right on the money. That's all I can say. And actually, I was thinking that I think he's practicing psychology and psychiatry without a license, might I add, because he is very good. So you're absolutely right about the whole immigrant/Muslim identity issue.
Thank you so much. This was so informative. Just going back to the previous conversation about how Muslim communities should respond, I'm just wondering what you think of the notion that when Muslim organizations, every time there is an act of terrorism within the US, go out of their way to denounce it or apologize for it. Apologize in the way that, oh yes, those were Muslims and we're so sorry and we feel so bad. Do you think that sort of reinforces the stereotype that they do somehow represent us, and that we are one monolith, and that we all do interpret the faith in a similar fashion? Should we not, like you said, perhaps, treat those as individual criminal acts, and by sort of coming out and going out of our way to sort of denounce them, we're actually sort of identifying ourselves with the perpetrators?
Before I answer that, I just want to say a couple of things. This is Mehlika Samadani. She is the executive director for an organization, Critical Connections. She's one of the most fearless persons I know in my life. If there is a problem in anywhere in the world and there are bombs flying, she will go there to make peace. Without any organization, if there's something happening in Sudan, if there's something happening in Bosnia, if something is happening in Pakistan, this girl would leave her 2 beautiful children and then go and be there and then take care of those people and hold their hands if that's what it's going to take, but also then become a peace builder in the people in that part of the world. So I want to thank you for what you do, because so Mehlika, it's a tricky situation, and you're right, because you don't see any church denouncing it. You don't see any other community denouncing it when a Christian is committing some wrong action. There was this man who actually had kidnapped these 3 girls, I don't know what his faith is, because his faith was never on trial, and I didn't see any church saying, we denounce this. Had he been a Muslim, the faith of Islam would be, oh, look how they're treating the Muslims. Oh, look how they're kidnapping women now. And then all the Muslim organizations would say, no, 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 we denounce this. And that's the dynamics that we are living in the minority community, who has a persecuted paranoia, if you will, after 9/11. And that is part of the problem, because we need to start to come out of that situation. But that would require the other forces. You know, you saw one of the graphs which was saying they're enhancers and they're things that would prevent those things. And those are the forces that we are fighting with. Because if a Muslim organization does not denounce it, then the next thing somebody's going to say on Fox, oh, they don't denounce it. But it's okay, we denounce it. No, you did it late. Too little, too late. So you can't win. So, and then you end up saying in the mirror, saying, I am evil. What do I do now?
Yeah.
I can't get out of this because I can't make you happy.
You know what
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. One of the things that I would like to see, because, you know, if it's, you know, if a right-wing Christian does something, to expect the Christians to say, no, they don't represent it. The same thing, but I would like to see it work a little differently sometimes. That when someone engages in an act of extreme violence, let's say they're a Muslim, that the Christian and Jewish community calls and says, we know that that person does not represent your faith. And likewise, if an extremist, you know, fundamentalist Christian does that the Muslims and the Jews will come and say, we know that. You know, how can we help? For me, that's even more important than, you know, the religion kind of feeding into, oh yeah, that person does represent us, and now I feel this burden to apologize on behalf of the whole faith, which logically makes no sense. I could understand psychologically or strategically it might be helpful, but I really would like to see the reverse happen.
I actually went through that process not too long ago, so this is pretty fresh in my mind. This debate happened where I am in the Muslim community in Albany. When Boston happened, now I moved from Massachusetts. This was very close to my heart, and just like everybody, I was driving my car and crying, okay? So even today it makes me emotional, I realize. Okay, so a part of that is, so what we sat down as a community, and there were some members who were saying exactly that. We don't even know these kids. We don't know who they are. Why do we have to say anything, right? Because we're sitting in Albany. Most of us don't know how to find Chechnya on a map, right? So what do we know? But what about my voice? Because my voice was missing, okay? I spoke because I wanted my voice to be heard. Because when I turn on the TV, just like everybody here, I hear, you know, exactly what I'm hearing. And it's very difficult for me to be silent, you know, not that you can tell. So what did we do as a community? So, you know, of course I am, you know, the single woman in our all-male board of directors. And so we were having this conversation, and the guys are going, well, we don't talk anyway. What are you talking about? So what did we do? We said, you know what, we're not going to go out there and denounce, because that's what everybody should know by now. And if they don't know, then it doesn't matter how many times we say it, because if they don't know it by now, that means they're unable to hear us. So what we did was we said, why don't we show people what we do? So we always have these little initiatives going within our community, you know, whether it is a local food bank or whatever it is. By the way, this, studies have been done. Muslims are the most charitable of all groups in this country, okay? Because of the mandate of giving away 2.5% of your net assets every year, they give a disproportionately large number to charity. So, so what we did was we chose a couple of activities we were doing anyway, and we decided to call the media, okay? These were actually 3 activities. We had on the Friday after the blast, our mosque announced, and I'm not the president of the mosque, just to let you know, I'm the president of the Muslim Community Center. So the mosque announced upon our request that the collection for that Friday will go to Boston. Okay? So we collected twice as much as we normally collect that day.